So the Democratic Alliance recently held a press conference speaking about the solutions for the economy, and it was about 2 weeks ago, so definitely time flies in politics. It feels like ages ago. But I really wanted to weigh in on 3 questions that came from the journalists that were invited to attend the press conference. So after John Steenhuisen delivered the speech from the DA, then came the Q&A session. And 3 questions really stood out, which is what I want to focus on in this video. And my reasons for wanting to basically give commentary on these questions or give my perspective on what the journalist asks. Of course, I don't think the DA did justice in responding, but the reason why I feel the need to give my perspective is, sometimes you can tell when, a question is coming from a journalist, maybe they just probing on the topic at hand, or if they're asking something, in relation to the political party or whatever subject that they are interacting with. You can tell when it's just that. And I've also been able to pick up when it's, an ideology statement, which is what I feel is sort of underlying these 3 questions. Hence, I wanted to weigh in. Because another thing that I just also want to throw out there, right? And I think it's important as a public, we are having these dialogues, we're having these exchanges through these platforms. I want to also just throw it out that it does seem that our media in South Africa, right, is having a bit of a challenge, basically accepting that we are transitioning into a post-ANC majority rule, meaning we're moving away from a situation where ANC is the dominant party in our politics, or a situation where ANC is just alone dominating our political space. That also includes the discourse, the conversation, what is regarded as good and bad politics. We're moving away from that era. It's happening gradually, but it's clear that we're moving away. If you look at what happened in the May elections, the formation of this coalition / GNU is suggesting that we are slowly moving away. But I think there are still some elements within our media that are still holding on to, an ANC majority, meaning they still perceive politics in South Africa as something that can only be influenced by the African National Congress, which to some extent, is suggesting that it is only the ANC that, has the right ideas, the right policies. And I'll give you an example of this, right? When you see an interview, when you witness an interview where a South African journalist is asking a non-ANC person, for example, let's say you ask the leader of Action SA, just an example here, I'm not trying to pull them into anything. You're asking a leader of Action SA, which formed 4 or 5 years ago, it's new in the political space. Herman Mashaba formed Action SA after he identified an opportunity for his movement. You're asking Herman Mashaba, who is the leader of Action SA, about ANC policies, asking Mashaba whether or not he supports BEE. Do we not know, do we forget sometimes that BEE is a policy that was introduced by the African National Congress? So this is precisely what I mean when I say that our media does seem to have a real problem, basically accepting that we are moving away slowly but surely, because Herman Mashaba did not initiate BEE. Because when you interview Herman Mashaba, what the public needs is for you to look at Herman Mashaba's proposal, what he's putting on the table, his unique policies. If maybe your question is about redress, ask Mashaba how would he go about achieving redress, as opposed to putting everyone in one box and saying, okay, cool, if you are going to do politics in South Africa, you have to address politics in the way that the African National Congress is done.
Government of national unity. Secondly, on the issues pertaining to IDT, what has been the brief that you have been given by the Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure within the country, Mr. Dean McPherson, on the allegations around the IDT CEO and the revelations of the Colin Mashawana Foundation allegedly using funds of EPWP to make deposits into some of the properties of the IDT CEO. Then lastly, on the issues of the economy, are you evidently saying that South Africans should be job seekers as opposed to job creators. When you use the phrase that nothing brings dignity as in a job, why don't you look at a multi-pronged approach, like also stimulating small enterprises, SMMEs within the country? How will that go about in inculcating a culture of job creation as opposed to a culture of job seekers within the country? Thank you.
According to SABC, right, just to drive my point, according to SABC, what SABC regards as unemployed, when someone is unemployed, according to SABC, remember, South Africa has an unemployment rate of 32.9%. Now, this is quarter 1, 2025 stats. I know quarter 2 new stats were released, but let's assume we are still on that 32.9. I know in quarter 2 of 2025, the stats again increased. The unemployment rate further increased. So, SABC says an unemployment person is someone between the ages 15 and 64, someone who does not have work. So they say here they must not have worked for pay, profit, or family gain during the 7 days before the survey. These are people that are available to work. They must be willing and be able to start working within a week of the interview. And then it's people who are also actively searching for work. So they must have taken specific steps to look for employment or start a self-employment venture within the 4 weeks before the interview. So basically, in a nutshell, we have a high unemployment rate in South Africa. And according to SABC, what is regarded as an unemployment person is just the criteria that I just mentioned. Now, key word or key element for me here with the criteria is that it's people who have actively searched for job opportunities. This means that what the DA is saying, this thing of jobs, job seeker, has a market. So what the DA is talking about here, there is a market. This jobs. They are speaking to certain people. It may not be every single person. Samuel Maseko is absolutely correct to, bring in the entrepreneur in this conversation. The DA may not be speaking to every single person, but the DA is saying we have solutions to address 32.9% of young people who fit this criteria. So it's not a demeaning statement. It's not something that is meant to lower someone to just job seeker and not necessarily job creator. Because I think all of us want to get to a point where we are self-employed, running our own businesses, self-sufficient and all of that. The idea of having a job does feel like you are basically coming below someone and all of that. Hey, I don't think that's necessarily what we should take away from this campaign of the DA, which is to create jobs, because clearly there is a huge market of people who are looking for jobs and actively seeking for job opportunity. And I also just want to state, on the point of job creators, people who create the jobs, right? To Samkela Maseko's point, I think it was Elon Musk who made the argument, or who highlighted the point, that an entrepreneur is someone who does not really need any jumpstart. An entrepreneur is a self-starter. It's someone who, they can make it happen. They can make things happen on their own, extremely self-reliant kind of profile, right? So when we talk about, a potential government player, entrepreneurship would not even be needed to be brought up into this conversation, because those people are extremely self-sufficient. In fact, the only thing an entrepreneur would need from the government is an environment that is suitable for them to thrive. Meaning, an entrepreneur does not need an environment that's high in crime. An entrepreneur would benefit from, low taxes or whatever. So those are just the things that are needed by an entrepreneur when we talk to government. But when it comes to government, entrepreneurship should not even be a conversation. Even though, we have these initiatives where the government now wants to introduce a transformation fund to give entrepreneurs money, I think those are nice to have, but I think a real entrepreneur is not waiting for the transformation fund. A real entrepreneur is already on the field, already making it happen, using their networks, using their skills, using their talent. I mean, every single one of us knows of a business owner, and that person is a high performer. That is someone who's on a whole different caliber. That person is not who Samkela Maseko is referring to when he says, why doesn't the DA help job creators? Job creators are already doing that. They're already ahead of the game, because like I said, even Elon Musk acknowledges that an entrepreneur is just a different profile. But when it comes to what the DA is putting on the table, we have to take that into consideration and not necessarily dismiss it because we think, oh yeah, the DA just wants to put us all in a box and then just limit people to job seeking and not job creating.
Thank you so much. Hi, John and the team there. My name is Pitso Molemani from Kaya News. John, I hear you trying to fight the laws to make things easier to create jobs. This is nothing new. I don't see you are different from the ANC has been saying this for so many years. As an opposition, are there no actions that you can do while you're waiting to be in government without saying that we are not in government yet? For example, when all political parties prepare themselves for votes, they get funded. Can't you, as an opposition party, also get investors to invest in the plans of supporting small businesses with the example of the 50,000 rand that you've just mentioned there, without waiting? Because, sweeping the reforms, regulatory reforms, it's going to take long, to be honest. People are hungry now. People want jobs tomorrow. They can't wait for any political party to fight. Keep on fighting, keep on fighting. Are there no other measures that can be introduced that the DA can come with in the interim? Thank you.
Very interesting point, right? Because investors do not work on a charity case. There is no scenario where a DA or any other political person can just call an investor and say, hey, Mr. Investor, just come to South Africa anyway. All of those concerns you have about crime, corruption, keep that aside. Just come anyway, right? That is just not how it works. If we, want to attract investors, if we want to grow our economy, the simple thing is that our laws, whatever laws we pass in South Africa, need to support this objective. That is what the government is responsible for. If you say you want investors, your laws should do the talking for you. The laws are the ones that give investors the guarantee that, okay, cool, this is the right environment, because they are not doing it out of charity. They're not doing it to say, hey, South Africans are struggling, South Africans needs jobs, let me go and just plant my factory there and hope for the best. That is just not how that side of the world works. So there's absolutely no scenario where you can bypass the laws, right? Because if you say to Mr. Businessman, don't mind the fact that we just passed an expropriation bill. Forget about that. We might have said in the bill that we're going to expropriate without compensation, but for you, Mr. Businessman, we're not going to expropriate. What do you think the guy is going to think? He's probably going to think, what in the corruption, fraud is happening here? If your laws are saying this, but you're coming and negotiating to me to say, no, don't worry about those laws. So that compensation doesn't apply to you. That also does not bring about confidence and trust, because it just basically means that South Africa is a lawless country. It basically means that things can be bypassed. What benefits, what guarantees does that give to a businessman having to put in the long-term investment plan into an environment where even upfront the laws are already kind of loose? When you put in laws, you want those laws to be upheld and implemented. Therefore, the laws need to reflect what you want to achieve. It's that simple. There is no bypassing it, because even if you think, okay, cool, we're going to negotiate this and that, the businessman will just say, what are the economic policies? What do they say about property rights? What is the crime statistic? What do they say about this and this and this? All of the things that are important for them to be able to, one, not only establish their company or their business in your markets, but also grow and have long-term longevity in your markets. That's what the businessman is looking for. And the only guarantees he has is by looking at your laws and saying, okay, cool, it looks like here we are on the same page, so let's go. So there is no bypassing it. There is no speed dial contact person that the DA or any other party could go about and say, no, just call in a favor. That is completely worrying for us to think that, that's the way to go about it, because we are then going to open up for bribery, fraud, and all of these things. And we have such a tough opposition in South Africa. Can you imagine bringing in an investor through the back door, bypassing things like the expropriation, which the ANC put into law, bypassing all of those things for the businessman to come into South Africa, and then mid-operation comes in an MK party, for example, and says, hey, but this person, why are they exempt from expropriation or from this and this and that? That would be a catastrophe. So if we want to see growth, if we are that serious about the crisis that we're facing of unemployment and people struggling, like the journalist is highlighting here, correctly so, because we do know that this is quite the problem, right? The state of our economy is creating quite the problem. It's simple. We need to change our laws ASAP.
Hajra Margie from Business Day. Mr. and Minister Steenhuisen, it's been a week now since the ANC decided to try and include other members in the GNU. Have you received no official notification from Luthuli House, from the SG of the ANC, or the president of the ANC? And then that makes me wonder, for the 100th time in the last year, how often does the GNU meet? Do you meet monthly? Do you meet weekly? Is there engagement in the GNU? Secondly, on DTIC, why has the DA not nominated, or have you nominated, a candidate for the Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry and Competition? And then thirdly, I understand the DA's challenge to be a few politically elite benefit. In Johannesburg, pens get bought for 57 Rand that cost 7 Rand 50. I still don't understand the DA's challenge to employment equity, because the majority of black professionals in this room, even those on stage, in the legal fraternity, in the medical fraternity, would not be where we are today without employment equity, without being given preferential treatment to get into that first job to work hard. So perhaps if you could help me understand the challenge to EE, especially since the education minister sitting here would know that in Joburg, at least, the majority of private schools are still whites are still the majority. So the challenge to EE sounds like a protection of privilege. So you can't then say you are not opposed to economic redress.
So on this employment equity part, what I want to just kind of discuss or look at briefly, right, when it comes to the question of what is the DA's problem with the Employment Equity Act, right? So let's just take it back a bit. So the Employment Equity Amendment Act number 4 of 2022, which is the recent amendment, let's just kind of look at what the act is saying, what the DA is objecting to, before we just label it as though, what is your problem with employment equity? Because I followed this conversation quite closely when the DA took to the media and said they are taking this act to court. I was very much following the story, and our journalists were just saying, hey, how dare the DA, ANC coming out and saying the DA is anti-transformation? Is that really the case? The Employment Act Amendment, the Employment Equity Amendment Act number 4 of 2022, basically says they are redefining the designated employer, which is basically saying that the act is strictly focusing on an employer with 50 or more employees. It is also giving provision for the Minister of Employment and Labor to set sector-specific numerical targets to ensure equitable representation of designated groups. The amendment is also saying that the targets are going to span across 18 economic sectors. The amendment therefore also states that non-compliance may lead to fines ranging from 1.5 million or 2% of turnover. And then for repeat offenders, it can go up to 10% of your turnover for people who repeat the offense. The DA's contestation here is that this Employment Act as what I've just listed briefly, what the act is now saying is, or they're arguing this in court, saying that the rigid sectoral targets amount to unconstitutional quotas, they burden businesses and may suppress economic growth and foreign investment. That's what the DA is saying. And what I wanted to say here, and I remember discussing this on Twitter, I think it was around the DA's message about BE kills jobs or something like that. And then someone on Twitter came out and said, well, if it was not for BE, certain things would not have been done. Certain people would not have achieved opportunities, which I disagree with that. I don't argue that point at all. But what I want to put out there is that the policies themselves do not exist in a vacuum, right? Employment equity is not what led to jobs. Employment equity did not create the jobs. The laws do not manufacture demand, right? They do not create a situation where people are hired left, right, and center. At the same time, laws cannot protect job seekers. Laws do not protect you and I from, for example, job loss, retrenchments. They do not protect South Africans for when companies want to leave South Africa. Employment equities and all of these acts do not protect us from that, i.e., perfect example of Goodyear. They have shipped up their manufacturing plant. They got all of the other things sorted. They probably just, covered themselves from a legal point of view, and they were out. There's absolutely nothing that the Employment Equity Act could have done in that situation. So what I want to say is that the laws, for example, like employment equity, what we are seeing in the conversation over time, including BE, is that these laws have strong loyalty benefits for the ANC. Strong loyalty benefits for the ANC because, of course, these things were implemented well when ANC was still enjoying quite the majority. And, we could definitely argue that they opened doors. A lot of people, have a lot of appreciation for laws like Employment Act, BE. They do link the fact that they got opportunities to these laws, the fact that these laws were just basically saying, hey, do not, make sure you hire a diverse group of people and so forth. But the reality is that in 2025, the climate, the workspace has changed a lot, right? It's totally different to 20, 30 years ago. And with that said, we also have to acknowledge and be grateful, right, for all of the difficulty that has happened for us to get to this point. But we're here now where companies, now more than ever in South Africa, around the world, they are in need of skills. So if you are skilled, hardworking, if you are the package, it's impossible for you not to succeed. It's impossible. Take someone who's skilled, dedicated, hardworking, the full package, and put that person in an environment that is growing, in an environment that has a lot of demand. That person has nothing to worry about. I do not care what the skin color is. I don't care what your skin color is. I meet a lot of excellent young men, women of all races. They're hard to ignore because if someone is just a beast, they're a beast. They're hard to ignore. And they're a magnet. They attract you. You want to hear them speak. You want to, these are just some guarantees that I want to give to everyone. That in as much as we look at the Employment Act, we look at BE and we want to hold on to it, the only thing that it does is that it just gives a lot of support for the African National Congress, even in a situation where in this country now, a lot of us have lost confidence that the ANC can, lead our country into better and all of that. But now we are holding on to these things, which is creating the loyalty. So we have to introspect. We have to introspect that, hey, guess what? The ANC might have gotten us over the line. Grateful for that. But we are in a totally different environment now. Like I said, if you're excellent, and if you are in an environment that is growing, if you're in an environment that has a demand for professionals, for skilled workers and all of that, you have nothing to worry about. You really don't. And then to close, because I think I've said a mouthful already, it's just to say it's a caution, right? It's a caution that if we allow our perspective on politics to only be centered around one political party, because at the end of the day, the ANC is a political party in a democratic environment, which they understand fully that if they do not defend their right to have a majority, their right to be the ones that, steer South Africa politically if they do not work and defend that right, it will be taken away. So if we allowing ourselves, because it's like self-destruction, it's like a self-harming thing where, you can see that man, something is wrong. The ANC needs to go back to the drawing board, as in like yesterday. But when someone says employment equity, suddenly now you are triggered. Hey, don't say that. The facts of the matter, like I said, if you're great, if you're excellent, if you are a doer, hardworking, and in an environment that's growing, which again, South Africa is not growing because of the very policies of the African National Congress, what do you have to worry about? You do not need an act to protect you. You do not need an act to give you opportunities. You do not need an act to make sure that you continue to get opportunities. That's just the fact of life. So if we allow ourselves to be so fixated on one political party when it comes to politics, that just gives them a lot of advantage and not us. So despite the fact that we've lost the confidence, if we continue to, maintain this attitude that no, when you say BEA, it's the end of the day, we're basically giving away our own power to, sort of determine and shape our own destiny. We're basically giving it away. We are in a democratic society where we can vote and voice our opinions through elections. If we allow things like employment equity and BE to be such a trigger, we're basically handing over our power and saying to these guys, no, you guys must determine our future, determine it for us, when we have been given so much opportunity to say, you know what, we want to take a different direction. Because if we continue on this path, what's going to happen, and it's happening around the world in so many aspects, is that the decisions are made for you. The ANC is making the decisions in the NEC meetings, in their caucuses, that they are not going to be friendly to capital. And guess what? That is having a direct impact on someone who's sitting at home today unemployed. Take the people that have been let go by Goodyear as a result of the decision of Goodyear to leave South Africa. A decision was made for you to be unemployed. You did not make the decision yourself. The decision was made for you. ANC deciding that they're going to be hostile towards capital is the reason why you are sitting at home unemployed. And that is precisely what I mean, that if we do not detach ourselves from this blind loyalty, just because someone said employment equity, suddenly now we are triggered. Thanks for watching. I'm going to leave it at that. The comment section is open. Let's get the conversation going. I love reading your comments. A lot of times it's really positive, which I am always grateful for the positive feedback. But even if you completely differ with my stance and you think, no, the journalists are well within their right to ask these questions, I'm just saying that it just sounds a lot like these people are ANC spokespeople, and that is not what we need from our media, especially during this critical time, like I said, where we are transitioning post an ANC majority in our political discourse. We do not need ANC spokespeople. They might truly believe in ANC policies. They might really still hold on to them. But when they are journalists, when they are acting in the capacity of being the media, they need to take that hat off and now wear the hat of an ordinary South African that does not have these ties. That's my argument. Anyway, hit subscribe, like this video. It goes a long way, and I look forward to seeing you guys again soon when I drop the next video.